We're live.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the monthly Speaking Up series oration of the Council for Strategic Affairs for International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. Those of you who registered probably saw our logo here. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the executive team of the ICHRRF, I invite all of you for our monthly Speaking Up series oration. A little bit about ICHRRF. International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom is a US-based nonprofit focused on upholding human rights and religious freedom all over the world through continuous monitoring, policy intervention, and collaboration. As an institution, we are focused on educational, research, legal, and human rights advocacy and charitable purposes. We strive to be an advocate for the human rights and religious freedoms of underrepresented communities across the world, including the United States. We believe that the humankind can no longer afford to be selectively vocal about the rights of only a specific set of people. A just and humane world requires fair treatment for all living beings. Our main focus is on indigenous rights and freedom, free speech, and their cultural preservation. Therefore, at the ICHRRF, we strive to be the voice of the voiceless. Some of our initiatives include monitoring violations of freedoms and sanctity of religious and philosophical minorities across the world. We conduct research into and document the culture, history, and challenges faced by such communities. We provide policy recommendations on human rights, religious diversity, and pluralism to international organizations, agencies, national and local governments. We promote collaboration to support the cultural and philosophical diversity across the world. We do have a Professor Ved P. Nanda Memorial Fellowship Training Program for Human Rights, and we are looking for appropriate candidates to join. We had our third annual ICHRRF conference that was just held in month of October 10th and 11th in Lorton, Virginia. The topic for today's lecture is Impact of Sectarian Laws on Human Rights, and our distinguished speaker is Machyar Kumbang. Today is Sunday, November 2nd, 2025, and it is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you will see Machyar Kumbang very soon. Machyar is an American artist of academic classism. He is a painter, sculptor, etcher, and a poet. He is of Indonesian descent and was born into an Orthodox Muslim household in the province of Aceh in Indonesia. After completing trade school, he received full scholarship to study art at Maine College of Arts in the US, and later on he became a US citizen. He founded the Kumbang Foundation in Virginia, which aims to harness the power of art, champion liberty, and promote social justice. Machyar has certain lived experiences during his childhood in Aceh in Indonesia, and he personally witnessed the detrimental effects of religious extremism on the Muslim community. He observed how Sharia law in Aceh, Indonesia, led to societal decline, inadequate education, and suppression of freedom of thought. These circumstances have resulted in oppressive local governance and hinders human rights flourishing despite adequate and abundant resources. So I'm not going to talk much about it because I will let Machyar talk about these issues. So my focus is just on introducing Machyar. He believes that as Americans who cherish liberty, freedom of religion, and our industrial nature, we can no longer afford to passively observe and hope for the best. Our democracy and rule of law are at stake. It is crucial to recognize that people following the sectarian laws of Islam lack respect for democracy and human high arts. So, without further ado, I will be handing over the platform to Machyar Kumbang, as I said that he has lived experience in Aceh, Indonesia, he believes that some of these fascist practices that are under the sectarian laws of Islam should be considered crimes against humanity. To view his portfolio online, you can visit his website or his Instagram page. The address is given. He'll be speaking for at least 45 minutes, and that will be followed by questions and answers. So I'll just use this quotation: speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Speak up and judge fairly. Some housekeeping rules. We would request everyone to keep themselves on mute to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our distinguished speaker. All the questions will be taken only after the speaker is done with his lecture. The questions should be sent to the chat room. They are moderated. Please be precise and brief in your questions. This event is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. Those of our audience members who request a certificate of attendance can write to christina.boozer@ichrrf.org, and we request our US-based audience to donate and financially support the ICHRRF. So without further ado, it's my honor and privilege to introduce and give the platform to Mr. Machyar Kumbang. Pleasure, sir. Please take your.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for the introduction by Dr. Adijanji and everyone who has been here in the discussion. So the topic today is we will be discussing the impact of sectarian laws on human rights. And we will look into how Sharia breeds radicalism and makes Islam as a death cult. Understanding Sharia law, which is a political ideology, and its tragic impact on society is crucial for our own very existence, for democratic republic and secularism. Hence, policymakers and parents should be fully informed about what the Sharia entails. As a society that upholds our very humanity, we owe it to ourselves the truth and evidence so that we can make better decisions for ourselves and our offspring. If the September 11, Fort Worth shooting, Boston bombing, and the attacks in Times Square teach us anything about radical Islam, then we must understand Sharia law and its diabolical implications. As complex and daunting as it is, we should not be intimidated by it. We must resist bad ideas that radical Islam imposes on society. In justifying Sharia law, Muslim pundits these days use the slogan Islamophobia against critics as a scapegoat to cover up the truth and twist reality. Muslim scholars evoke Islamophobia to argue that there's nothing to see here and there's no there. This tactic, however, only drives the Muslim community into ignorance and living in denial. We need to bear in mind that being critical about the harm of radicalization as Islam has become a death cult is not a matter of Islamophobia, but it is about being true to ourselves, and the public deserve clarity. It is hard to talk about Sharia law candidly without offending anybody. But for the sake of our own existence and dignity, we have no better option but to confront Sharia law head on. Now let's take a look at the structure and method, the essence of Sharia law. A tyrannical Islamic system. Islam without Sharia law is not Islam. So the Sharia is essentially a totalitarian system. Islam is a supremacist religion built on falsehoods, myth, and tempered with conspiracy theories, unproven hypotheses, and smitten the doctrine into the minds of Muslims with fear. It is claimed a total solution for everything, but by coercion and violence. This madness is to expand the conquest to take over the globe. At least that's what the Islamists has in mind. The effect on the idea is to build a caliphate such as transgression against one's will and secular society, gender apartheid, honor killings for apostate and blasphemy in defending the prophets or Islam, and terrorist attacks. More on this as we expand this discussion, and I will tell you the story and experience that I encountered firsthand as I grew up in the province of Aceh, Indonesia, and the effect of Sharia law. But next, tyrant as a prophet. Sharia law represents that the Prophet Muhammad is a deceiver and a tyrant. Between Sharia law and the acts of the Muhammad are two dimensions that are inseparable. They are intimately intertwined. And we will discuss also this as we expand the discussion. Next, lack of decency and superficial spirituality. Islam, as underpinned by Sharia law, is not about moral virtue, not about dignity and well-being, and neither about spirituality, but it is about the religion itself to eliminate Jews or Judaism, Christianity, and other aspects of humanity such as figurative art, music, and philosophy. Next, the Quran as an instrument to do harm. Ulamas and Muslim scholars use the Quran to weaponize Muslim and society. Muslim as a collective community or ummah reject sound and viable interpretations of the Quran, but advocate skewed, barbaric, and sadistic interpretations of the scripture. This is by practice and per da'wah, which means invitation to Islam. And this also will elaborate more later as we discuss in depth about the notion of hadith. And then there are some verses in the Quran was revealed in Mecca, and then other parts of the Quran was revealed in Medina, and so forth and so forth. Next, reason esteemed as impurity. Islam of Muhammad discourages reason, inquiry, and intellectual honesty. The religion dissuades Muslims from taking personal responsibility and introspection. Critical analysis are often threatened and inflicting with persecution and even death. Next, labels and misrepresentations. Labels deceive Muslims by giving the meaning and content of the tenet in reverse. So this is what we'll discuss also in depth as we get into the hadith and the slogan that they use that misled Muslims, such as Sahih, which means supposedly authentic, but as it turns out, it is not authentic. And then there's a notion of Amar Ma'ruf, supposedly means to invite people to do good, and as it turns out, the other way around, and much more. So now let's take a look at three vicious cycles that lead to radicalization and sectarian violence. Firstly, to love the Prophet Muhammad more than we love ourselves. While secondly, Muhammad asked Muslims to do harm to society in the name of the religion by establishing the Sharia, otherwise Islam is incomplete. And thirdly, to be a real Muslim, you must obey God and the Messenger, known as Rasul. But then, Rasul is pointing to Muhammad, who dehumanizes Muslims to deny their human endowments, such as intelligence and creativity, which comprise of self-awareness, conscience, independent will, and creative imaginations, as popularized by Stephen Covey. As Allah in Islam is not accessible to people, therefore, Muslims must obey the fictional Muhammad, who served as a surrogate for God, and this put God in the backseat. The conclusion for this presentation: Sharia law, also known as the Hudud Criminal Code, is not the principle of moral virtue, and neither good source of spirituality. Sharia law is not designed so that people can live with dignity, and so the sectarian law is not intended for human flourishing. If Voltaire, a French philosopher, declares that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities, the same goes to ulamas and Muslim preachers, that when those Islamic experts can make Muslims believe in absurdity, those very preachers can make Muslims and jihadis commit atrocities and all sorts of evil deeds. Thank you.
Do we have any of those videos that Mr. Kumbang wanted to?
Yes, we do have a video and we have tested, and I will play as we have this, some of the question the audience may have, and we'll show some of the evidence how the preachers teach the doctrine into the Muslims that affected Muslim into and get them radicalized. Probably we can let's go ahead and play that videos, and then we will discuss further details about the matter. Thank you,
Okay.
colleagues.
Yep. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, playing the video.
Kalau orang itu tidak sholat, dipanggil, disuruh sholat. Tetap nggak mau sholat, dibunuh. Tapi tidak murtad. Ya, tapi dia dibunuh. Nggak ada gunanya dia hidup. Kematian lebih baik buat dia. Tidak nambah umur dan nambah dosa. Itu dalam madhab Syafi'i dan madhab Maliki.
That is why when Muslims go and conquer the adjacent country, what do? We kill them all? No. The Prophet says, the first thing you do is call them to Islam. If they accept it, leave them. Khalas, they're Muslims, we go. We don't want your country, we don't want your land, we don't want your wealth. If they refuse, then tell them Allah obliged upon you to pay taxation, jizya. If they refuse, then we have to fight. And if we fight you, then we capture you, you become our slaves, and we take your land, and you take where, because you refuse, I give you two good options.
Yeah, so that is the topic and the points that we are going to discuss, and I welcome questions and any comment from the audience. Thank you.
I don't see any questions from the audience in the chat room, so I will start with a question of myself.
Sure.
As you see in some other religions like Christianity, at least in the medieval time, there was a lot of violence and there were injunctions to kill the non-believers.
Mm-hmm.
But over a period of time, Christianity, despite the doctrinal injunctions, was able to reform itself.
Yes.
Do you see any possibility of Islam reforming itself on the same lines, keeping in view the modern legal and human rights standards?
Yes. Thank you for the question, Dr. Dijanji. The answer is unlikely unless young Muslims willing to read the Quran and read the Hadith themselves. Unless the mosque is open for a dialogue like this, such as like what we're doing right now, if the mosque are open dialogues like this, in which the communities can hear themselves the dialogue and the argument presented, that will be a good line, a good possibility, so that the most going people can learn themselves from the other perspectives. But as of now, traditionally speaking, the mosques are not open for discussion. As they're willing to discussion between Islam and other religions and with other communities, but not within the Muslim themselves and looking into what's going on in Islam. So there is fundamental problem in Islam that everything in Islam considered as a law, which makes the I guess all the translations that skewed translations into Quran that insinuates violence. That's what they put forward. While translations that suggest good idea, for example, open-minded, to utilize our mind and our heart, that kind of translation usually being cancelled or abrogated. And that's why the verse in the Quran, there are certain numbers of verses in the Quran, for example, no compulsion in religion, which I think is very good, and that creates tolerance and that creates openness. But that verse under Sharia law is not working. And also the verse 62, chapter Al-Baqarah, that suggests that all people who do good, and could that be Christians or Jews or Muslim, Hindu, whoever do good in life, there will be guaranteed prosperity and security for them, and there is no worry and but that verse under Sharia law is abrogated. They don't uphold and they don't really appreciate it. So what they do uphold is any violent verse, for example, verse 29 and verse 123 in chapter 5, that suggests, hate your neighbors and hate everybody and conquer other lands and destroy other religions or other folks. That type of verse that they like. So traditionally in Islam or in Islamic school, either in madrasa or in the mosque, this kind of teaching that they put forward, and rarely I've seen imams doing the other way around. In other words, discuss more good translation of the Quran and put aside all the violent verses and the hadiths that cause confusion, that lead to young people either self-radicalize or that cause other preachers to join this mafia type of mentality to preach violent verses and violent hadiths into the people. So to answer your question, unless young people willing to read themselves critically, read themselves the translations of the Quran and the hadiths, unless the imam are willing to talk to young people, young Muslims, candidly, openly, intellectually honest about the reality and the state of Islam where they are at the moment. But until then, I don't see a light coming to Islam, but darkness and despondency.
Okay, thank you for that very frank answer. I'm going to read a question here. It's from Mr. Clemens, our executive director. Which Islamic sect is predominant in Indonesia? Indonesia also seems to have a syncretic Muslim-Hindu culture. How was this made possible, and how does this play out at popular level?
What popular in Indonesia is called mazhab, among them Hanafi and Shafi'i, which all the mazhabs in basically doesn't make any difference. Whether Hanbali or Shafi'i or Maliki, it won't make any difference, because in the end, those mazhab promote and advocate Sharia law. No matter which dimension they argue, it comes to a point where establishing Sharia law is basically to deny our own ability to think independently for ourselves, and women has no right to think for themselves, and that includes also young people who have a different understanding about certain aspects of the Quran, has no right to say, hey, let me think it's over. I got to to learn about this, about what it means, siyam, which recently or usually translated into fasting. But young Muslim in particular, don't get to say, let me think it over, let me study more about this, and let me live my life according to my heart and my mind. So young people don't have that they don't have that freedom to say that.
Okay. The next question is from me. There are 57 Islamic countries in the world at this point in time. The video you showed us showed the Imam talking about slavery, that we will enslave you if we conquer you. To your knowledge, how many of these 57 countries are practicing slavery, especially sexual slavery?
In the background, I think the first slavery is mental slavery. That is permeated throughout communities. Either we talk about in Indonesia, Indonesian Muslim communities, either Pakistanis or Afghans or Arabs, and that's pretty much across the board as far as mental slavery is concerned. And then in the deeper slavery, which is usually women in this case, that put them into gender apartheid. So by doing, impose on them the burqa or hijab, and that denies their ability to think independently or make decisions for themselves. And in society, less and less, as the Sharia law impose, less and less women participates in the governance and in the whatever the local community is doing as collective people. Now, so that is the as far as the slavery, and then sexual slavery. There is a bit of practice as Sharia law, I guess, executed, in which, for example, when a male or husband declare divorce against her, and he just said that 3 times, and then makes her being divorced. In order for her to come back to her husband, she has to sleep with other men for 1 night, just for the sake of sleeping with other men, and she has to have sex. So in that dimension, there is a slavery practice in Sharia law, and but it's not quite popular in terms of the mainstream media. That's less publicized, but that's something that's happening in the background quite a bit.
Okay, the next question is again from Mr. Clemens. Is hardcore Sharia mostly followed by uneducated people or economically backward people, or is there significant following among college-educated youth as well?
Very good question. The followers of the Sharia law is not just common people or layman people, but it's also up to the community from college students, professors, and high educated people. And as I've seen in Aceh province of Indonesia, those who are behind Sharia law, they have pretty high degree postgraduates, and many of them are professors, and also many of them are teachers in universities, and certainly many behind them are laymen, Muslims who just listen to the ulamas, in this case the Muslim scholars, who also the president of or the leaders of the madrasas also advocates the Sharia law.
The next question is again from Mr. Clemens. Says, are there any Muslim countries where one can see broad-minded Islam without Sharia being practiced?
That only happens under secular system. But until then, there's very unlikely. A country that lean toward secular system, they tend to be open-minded. So the Sharia mentality tend to be less and tend to be challenged by the public, tend to have more room for critical thinking and dialogues.
I'm going to read a question by Dr. Nagesh Borse.
Mhm.
And the question reads, thank you for your great presentation. How does the local judiciary system in countries like Indonesia perceive these religious aggressions? A follow-up to how Christianity has moved away from its historic mindset is whether a lack of formal education is a key factor among such followers.
Yeah, in Indonesia, the way it works in Indonesia, first is the community execute Sharia law as a state law, such as what happened. That is the case. What happened to the province of Aceh of Indonesia. Once the Sharia law executed as an official law, as a Sharia law, then the local governments impose that law. And also, firstly, they said that, well, this is only for Muslim community. But in reality, that's not what happened. Yes, when the first year that they started to beat people up on the stage, the victim was Muslim, but later expands to other folks like Christians who open the restaurants during Ramadan, during lunchtime. So they got their cooking equipment and confiscated, and they have to pay some kind of penalties. So the Sharia law is not just for the Muslims. Sharia law is they imposed into everybody when it is official. So in the case of Indonesia, and this is what the concerns, what I have has been discussing with with the Christians and other folks in Indonesia, that they are very concerned because it's going to be affect them in many ways. This has happened a few years ago. A citizens of Jakarta was running for a governor, and he made a statement about one verse of the Quran, verse 51, chapter 5, and he said something to the effect that don't be fooled with this verse that's saying that non-Muslim not supposed to be a leader, to be a governor of your community. And he just expresses exactly what's in the Quran. He didn't twist. I guess that is standard interpretation, but he got that comment got him to go to jail for about 2 years. So this is the evidence that Sharia law is not just for the Muslim, but being imposed to everybody. And then later, just not long ago, the daughter of the founder of the country of Indonesia, Sukmawati Soekarno Putri, she wrote a poem, right, concerning the niqab. She said something to the effect that the niqab is less beautiful. She didn't say that. She said that less beautiful than local traditional, women, how they dress and things like that. So she wrote into a poem, and that got her into trouble, and she had to leave Islam. So this is the idea, the concern that I am trying to raise, that so Sharia law is not just for the Muslim, but it will be imposed into everybody. So it is up to us now, and it is, I think, it's an obligation on everybody to have the understanding to educate ourselves about the danger of Sharia law that poison the society.
So the next question I think is from me, and
Mhm.
it is specifically about Indonesia. Although Indonesia is a Muslim majority country, but there are 5 state approved religions that state acknowledges. Now, a province like Aceh could be considered an exception. Does the central government in Indonesia still upholds and implements Sharia laws universally in total disregard of other state approved religions? What is the situation?
At this point, the central government seem to don't have much control what's going on in Aceh because they have this called special or privileged status. Because so when they have the province of Aceh a privileged status to the province, so the autonomy status that Aceh has use that opportunity to use Sharia law as a something that the central government cannot touch. So this makes the central government a little bit of, I guess, in conundrum, unless they uphold their constitution that guarantee freedom of speech. So that is something that we have to wait until what the central government is going to do, because it seems to be a contradiction between constitution of Indonesia that guarantee every citizen's freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, but in Aceh, since Aceh has this autonomy, um, that seemed to be contradict because the Aceh province can do whatever, seem to be whatever they want as far as the religious freedom is concerned. They impose the Sharia law, which denies the constitution of Indonesia in that case. So we have to wait how the in coming years how the central government will respond to Sharia law, as the Sharia law getting more and more I guess become a disease into society.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Clemens. Do you think American Muslims or Muslims living in non-Muslim countries can take the lead in reforming Islam and making it more open to dialogue and peaceful coexistence?
Yeah, and Muslims who lives in secular countries, there's a possibility that Muslim can make a difference and makes a open dialogue and can reform Islam. It's a lot of room in there. As long as they live in secular society, so there's a room there. It just takes some kind of courage, surely, and for the Muslim to do that. To firstly, they have to educate themselves and to speak up and talk to the mosque imams in particular. But at this point, mostly mosques that I've seen, mosques at this point are not designed to welcome critical thinking. Mosques are not designed to facilitate a dialogue between Muslims that have a different opinion on certain aspects of Islam, because they see that the mosque see that any discussion, any dialogues that inspire young people, young Muslims, toward secularism, toward liberals ideas and things like that, the imam concerned that they might leave the mosque completely. This is what happens a few years ago, as I proposed an idea to an imam here where I live. I make a call and I said to the imam that I'm willing to prepare as a backup speakers, because sometime during the Friday prayer there is a imam cannot make it, and so in case the imam cannot make it for the speech, I'm willing to prepare as a backup speakers. So interestingly enough, the imams asked me firstly, how am I training traditionally? I'm upholding the hadith, am I upholding the traditions and things like that. So I said that, and then he asked, what kind of topic you are going to present. So I said that I'm presenting relevant issues, meaning, and he asked me if relevant issues, not bringing the traditions, if you're not speaking about, hadith and things like that. We are concerned if you tend or leaning toward liberal thinking. We worried if the or community might leave the mosques later on. So we can't really let you to be a backup speakers unless we know that you are traditionally upholds the Islamic orthodoxy, which is hadith, they're referring to the hadith, and you're not supposed to question, because questions is can lead to some other aspects of discussion that inspire young people to even ask more questions, which is not the most are not prepared for that.
So I have a question, or more like a comment. Traditionally, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been very conservative, enforcing Wahhabi brand of Islam.
Mhm.
But under the current power structure, with major power being held by Prince Mohammed bin Salman, there have been reforms initiated. And specifically 2 reforms I will mention. One is that now women are being allowed to drive. And second, state is sponsoring music concerts and things like that. And in these music concerts, I see women without hijab or niqab or burqa. What are your comments on this new trend coming from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the keeper of 2 holy shrines?
Yeah, that for the last few years, I've seen a good improvement in that country. That he make a comment. He has an interview on with Fox News. He says something to the effect that it will be a major shake-up in the hadith, in tradition, that his government trying to put aside that kind of teaching, because it sounds to me he realized that radicalism, much of it caused by this violent hadith and violent interpretation. So, and then lately, as we all know, that a woman can drive now, and then there is first of all, lately held in Saudi Arabia for the humor festival and jokes and stuff. That seemed to be, I think, quite a bit of transformation for the last few years. It looked like the trajectory that MBS taken seemed to be on the right direction for liberal, for secular, and open to the West, open to critiques. So I welcome his approach to the religion of Islam at this point.
I don't see any more questions in the chat room, so I'll ask another question. In contrast to Saudi Arabia, since 1979, following the Islamic Revolution in Iran, the Sharia law have been, enforced very brutally, and Iranian women have come out in the forefront by, boycotting the hijab or chador. And a lot of women were imprisoned. Some of them were murdered while they were in prison. But more recently, the moral police has stopped enforcing the laws about hijab or chador. What are your comments on this observation? Does this show a ray of light in that strictly Islamic, conservative, ultra-Orthodox Shia country?
Yeah, that's a good news. If the moral police start to stop enforcing the Sharia law, I think that's quite transformative, considering the Iran since 1979. Hopefully, the direction, that small step would lead to more. I guess will lead to open society, will lead to freedom for women to speak up for themselves, and that will lead to tolerance. As the country open to more tolerant for the critique, as women willing to criticize the government rightfully, and if they welcome their safety without persecution, without death, I think that is I think that's a big step. If the moral police start to not reinforce the Sharia law, I think that's a big news.
There's another sort of question from Dr. Borse. How is social media positively or negatively impacting youth in these Sharia-led geographies, especially in light of recent events in Nepal?
Yeah, in Nepal, I don't know much about what's going on in Nepal, but generally speaking, I think the persecution toward minority in Nepal, I think need.
I think the question is something different. There was toppling of the government led by the youth
Yeah,
in Nepal, and the question is that can that kind of approach be seen in Islamic countries where youth come out and revolt against the oppressive system using social media?
it seems very unlikely. Very unlikely, even if it happens to the degree to which that we've seen in Iran, as Mesa Amini, the death after the death of Mesa Amini, and they can do protests, but the effect is quite tragic. To topple the government, what we've seen in Nepal, I think it's quite unlikely. Quite unlikely, because what happens is, as the cleric, the ulama, this ulama has very large followers, and to have youth with different voice, and as a as brave as it is, but it's behind the ulama have a bigger crowd, and they have the bigger mobs that can subdue, that can terrorize the youth not to speak up, let alone to try to protest openly.
Well, there are no more questions, so I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Machyar Kumbang, for this very enlightening conversation. We know your background, so you are a free thinking, rational thinking, modernistic, basically an artist by profession. For our viewers, in Serang language, actually, Machyar means steadfast or resilient,
Yeah,
and Kumbang means actually captain of a ship. So I hope that in future years, you become a resolute and steadfast captain of a ship of this much more liberal, much more rational thinking, devoid of oppression, devoid of cruelty, that is afflicting very large part of humanity. So we wish you success. This was your first occasion to speak on our platform, and I can assure you this will not be the last. We will keep on inviting you because we like your, out of box thinking, your, aptitude and your inner fortitude to call a spade and not be afraid of the consequences. So we thank you from the bottom of our heart.
Yeah.
This lecture has been recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel as a future educational resource. And as I said, we shall stay in touch with you. Thank you very much indeed till that time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It has been a pleasure for the presentation. Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.